Sin City, City of Lights, oasis in the desert, entertainment capital of the world, marriage capital of the world, divorce capital of the world. It's been called a Disneyland for adults, a monument to the age of capitalism. It is one true world cosmopolis, a study of contrasts. In a city full of gamblers, grifters, pimps, and hustlers, it also has more churches per capita than any place on the planet. I am talking, of course, about fabulous Las Vegas. To the world over, one word conjures dreams of fortune and glory that turn into a reality on the flip of a card. Vegas. The first encounter was 1829, then John C. Fremont's exploratory party a couple of decades later. The Mormons in 1855. From its very start, the land had a history of attracting outsiders who sought solace and relief in the isolation of a mountain-caged desert. Founded as a city in 1905 along the Union Pacific Railroad, the city might have forever remained a sleepy and dusty little stopover on the way to California had fate not intervened in the form of President Franklin D. Roosevelt's decision to make the Black Canyon on the Colorado River, bordering Nevada and Arizona, the site of the Hoover Dam, an engineering marvel that opened up the water-thirsty southwestern part of the United States for mass settlement. Not only did the Hoover Dam project provide a source of water for southern Nevada, it also allowed for air conditioning. This made a region of the country which was previously uninhabitable for several months a year a place where people could survive the scorching heat in the relative comfort of their homes and vehicles they used for transportation. By the time the Second World War ended, Hoover Dam was providing the electricity to support an emerging city's infrastructure. With the country in a celebratory mood after Germany and Japan were defeated in 1945, moral and cultural inhibitions of the nation were loosening. All the city needed was a push to expand into a getaway for the newly prosperous jet-set crowd. As the hydroelectric power plants gave the city its electrical juice, an important figure conspired to use his own personal, political, and business juice to consolidate the crime syndicate under one roof. This man's name was Meyer Lansky. The story of Las Vegas becoming the gambling mecca of the world begins with Meyer Lansky. Born Meyer Sechelowski to Jewish parents on the 4th of July, 1902, in the land of present-day Belarus. Whenever asked, Meyer, who had Americanized his name when his family immigrated to New York to Lansky in order to escape the terrible pogroms against the Jewish people in the 19th century Russian Empire, he would say that he was of Polish descent. Arriving in New York in 1911, the city was crowded with new immigrants competing for any kind of work that would be a ticket out of the squalid conditions of the slum district. New York was a Darwinian breeding ground for the shadowy underworld characters who would use cunningness, treachery, and violence to dominate many industries. Contrary to the way crime syndicates have often been portrayed in popular culture, these organizations were enmeshed not only with the corrupt elements of society, but also with the legitimate world of business and politics. When alcohol was made illegal by the Volstead Act, an amendment to the Constitution, the crime syndicates, or by their polite euphemism, families, became de facto pharmaceutical companies with a monopoly on America's most popular drug, alcohol. Distribution networks were established all around the country, and behind this mammoth undertaking was Lansky, a criminal mind seemingly possessed of a preternatural instinct for the efficient organizational skills needed to make all the operational pieces work in synergy. Lansky would act in the capacity of CEO of a conglomerate corporation, as well as a liaison for international dealings over 40 years, the 1920s through the 1960s. Although he seldom set foot in the desert, Las Vegas was established as corporate headquarters for all illicit activities, laundering the illegal proceeds through the gambling casinos. An astute student of history and human nature, he was especially fond of drawing inspiration from Napoleon Bonaparte, another man short of stature but long in political ambitions. Lansky famously said, "There's no such thing as a lucky gambler. There are just winners and losers. The winners are those who control the game. All the rest are suckers. The only man who wins is the boss." From the book, The Money and the Power, he adopted another grander axiom as well, that crime and corruption were no mere byproducts of the economics and politics of his adopted country, but rather a cornerstone. That understanding tilted the odds in his favor. Together with his childhood friend, Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, who became the ill-fated frontman for the glorious early days, Lansky got his start under the tutelage of Arnold Rothstein, the most famous gambler and bookmaker in early 20th century America. The writer F. Scott Fitzgerald took inspiration from the legendary gambler when he created the unseemly associate of Gatsby, Meyer Wolfsheim. In the great American novel, The Great Gatsby, Rothstein exposed the corrupt underbelly of a naive America when he fixed the 1919 Baseball World Series, still the greatest scandal in sports of all time. Another close associate of Lansky was the Italian mafioso boss, Charles Lucky Luciano. The Italian mafia had a stranglehold on gambling operations throughout the cities of America since the First World War's end. Luciano doled out responsibilities to his subordinates with all the authority of a feudal baron. The tentacles of organized crime went deep into America's Justice Department. Using blackmail and extortion, the crime syndicate was in bed with J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, in what people speak of with conspiratorial overtones as the Deep State. Even the OSS, predecessor to the CIA, would develop an important relationship with Lansky and his associates, as we shall see later. And you've wrote 40 pages so far, and started a documentary. You went back to where it was created, the first encounter, 1829. John C. Fremont's party a couple decades later. Mormons, 1855. And then the Hoover Dam is what really started.
It really served no value to anyone until
the water,
until they could
and power
divert
was here,
water
right?
and power here.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. You know, there were exploratory parties, coming here. I think the Spaniards were even here before Fremont was. But and you anybody that's been here during the summer knows. It's not a hospitable environment. It's not suitable for living.
So air conditioning, when was that invented? Let's see, Jamie.
I think that was around the 40s. I think around the 1940s and 50s. Well, yes, because it coincided with the development of the luxury hotels here.
July 17th, 1902
was when AC was invented.
First used in homes in 1914. So
we're mass consumed.
We're talking 1935. You've got A Place of Their Own, A Suitcase Full of Money. That's when Benjamin Bugsy Siegel came out here, 1935. About?
No, the mid 40s, I think.
Mid 40s.
Yeah.
So 30 years later.
I think when we think about this city, it's good to think about it in stages. You know, the initial stage is the stage when an infrastructure was put in de facto by the Hoover Dam being put in. You know, and then that, you know, it could have. There's the factor of that the city already. If you look at the early 1900s, gambling was sometimes legal, sometimes not legal. A lot of times it depended who was politically in office and who was running things.
Even here?
Yeah, in the state, yes.
So there was a time that was like...
There were times when it wasn't legal, yes.
Really?
Yes,
Okay.
I think it was 1927. Since 1927, it was fully legal.
Okay.
And it hasn't been a period since then. It's a...
Even though other
Good.
states might have been having problems getting it legal, like...
Oh, there's no other
They never
state.
had any.
No,
They
no
never
other
had
state that
any
ever legalized
gambling. Okay.
No, and also no other state that made for quick divorces. You know,
Yeah.
that was a thing. You know, going back to the 30s and 40s, you went to Nevada, like especially like people like actors and that sort of thing. If they wanted to divorce their wives, they came here.
And
Or
it
the
wasn't
husbands.
this
Yeah.
long drawn out thing in most
process,
states.
right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the mafia, what did they saw this opportunity here then, where they could laundry money, right? I mean, was that the main interest?
The myth is always right. The Bugsy Siegel like came here and like was driving through the desert and had like a Paul in the St. Paul and Damascus kind of experience where like the white light shined on him and it's like, oh, I see a city of lights, you know.
Yeah.
I see something here that nobody else does, you know.
Yep.
There is a little truth to that. It was already, there already were little, I think the El Rancho was already here. Downtown was built up during the period when they were building the Hoover Dam. The Boulder Highway, you know, they wouldn't allow the miners, not the miners, but the
Dam workers.
dam workers to gamble in Boulder City because they think they were going to be as productive, so they had to come into the city lines.
Okay.
And they took the Boulder Highway trail, you know, and that then became, you know, leads directly to downtown.
Okay.
Where there was
Yeah, it
the
does.
Golden Gate.
Yep.
I think is officially considered the first casino in 1905.
Yep.
The El Cortez was there. The Fremont. These casinos like were before even the mafia moved in, and like, you know, like
Run
we
by the
talk
Mormons? Were they run by the Mormons? Those early?
No, I you know, no, there were different, just like you know, a lot of gambling. You think about it in prior to the 1940s, most of the gambling was in northern Nevada, Reno, and Carson City. It was close to San Francisco. And, you know, there was always that kind of relationship between striking it rich with the gold rush. You know, here there's the silver mines, you know.
Then they could bet
and
their
the attach-
silver
yeah.
and gold, right?
And so this was
Okay.
always a Western state with, I guess you call like libertarian views. I have not come across, and there are good resources. I just haven't researched it that thoroughly. Where you know these these places were owned by people like Western pioneers.
Says John F. Miller initially opened a temporary tent hotel, the Miller Hotel, on the property in 1905. So that was the beginning, and then it was purchased. They renamed it Gulso.
They were, they were frontiersmen.
catering to
they were frontiersmen who just moved further west.
Right.
You know, like some stopped in Missouri, some stopped in Idaho, and some came out to Nevada. And then in Nevada, they took advantage of the law. And, you could just imagine, many Western movies are made where, the center of violence is always in the poker hall, right? In the bar, the saloons, That's essentially what they were. Yeah. They call them sawdust joints. Yeah. And that myth of the mafia making this town always is I believe my contention is that it's clear that after the Cuban Revolution, Castro took over, and he isolated Cuba then from the rest of the Americas, and the mob had been going there using that country, particularly the casinos of Havana, as a way of laundering organized crimes money.
This was before Vegas.
It's a little touched on, not chronologically correct, I think, in The Godfather 2.
Yeah.
With Michael going to Cuba to invest, and Hyman Roth is based on Meyer
These things are
Lansky.
shaking like crazy. Let's see.
It's probably me moving the table.
Yeah.
That's why. Yeah, I just gotta put my hands down.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that affect the vibration?
Nah, probably not. It probably doesn't matter. Yeah, well, Lansky was down in. Didn't he have a casino in Cuba, or where was his?
Well, I think he had
South America somewhere.
He had pieces of all the casinos. It wasn't. I think of him as being sort of like the CEO of organized crime that put everything together. He didn't do it all himself, and he certainly needed. You need when you're dealing with illegal activities, you need the threat of violence is very important, and so you need soldiers.
Right. Yeah. Who are the soldiers today? The police?
You could say that.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Go
rob a casino and see who comes.
Right. Government regulations and laws.
Yeah.
Right. Now now they're embedded.
We're back in the day.
The soldiers are embedded into politicians. They're the soldiers now, protecting the money of these rich casino.
I think in our lifetimes. I mean, I don't. Maybe I was naive when I was younger, but I definitely thought of law enforcement, particularly before 9/11, as more like a peacemaker role.
I like what you've written so far. And for the first episode that we've got, because this is the discussion after the first episode. We start where Las Vegas up to the Hoover Dam, it was first encountered 1829, the Mormons 1855. So we're really we start going way back. If we went farther back than that, we'd go back to this valley used to be an oasis of prehistoric dinosaurs, right? The valley was full of water. We could have gone way back, but we didn't.
I think
and we
as
don't
far
need
as
to.
Humans go, maybe at least 10,000 years.
Yeah, and then we start getting in. It starts getting settled, and then the mafia starts looking at the city. Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, was he the first? Was he like the one who really came out here and said, this is a big opportunity? Was he like,
I think he's kind of given credit for that.
okay,
You know, and well, especially the idea
he
of
whacked the real guy?
well, the idea of like not just coming here to gamble, but coming here to have a good time in every way.
Okay.
You know, and the idea of he was the first guy to have the idea of an opulent kind of hotel where, you know, his vision was, you know, where celebrities would go to, where the very rich, the jet set crowd
Okay.
would go to for the weekend, you know, and in a way that did kind of follow that model then after that.
And it's after the Second World War ended. Hoover Dam was built, and it's supporting that infrastructure, giving room to grow.
Yeah, I would say that was the first stage of rapid growth.
Okay.
Was in that period. I think from around 45 to 60, the population, now you're dealing in just a few thousand people still, but the population at least doubled during that period.
I like what you say here. 1945, moral and cultural inhibitions of the nation were loosening. All the city needed was a push to expand into a getaway for the newly prosperous jet set crowd. An important figure conspired to use his own personal political and business juice to consolidate this crime syndicate under one roof. There's Meyer Lansky. That's 1945.
Yep,
He came out here?
Meyer Lansky and Benjamin Siegel were knew each other from when they were children.
So I heard of Bugsy. Okay, I've watched all these. I like all these old mafia films. Until you wrote this first 40 pages of documentary, I'd never heard of Meyer Lansky. I've been here since 1986. Why don't we hear? Is that am I just not paying attention, or is there a lot of people haven't heard of Meyer Lansky?
I think the really smart, clever people do that by design. You know, they're in the case, certainly in the case of organized crime. I mean, part of the goal is not to get caught, not to be noticed. Where Benjamin Siegel wanted to be, I guess you could say he was the John Gotti of his era.
Okay.
Or you could say like where he liked the attention.
Oh, okay.
He hung around with Hollywood people.
Meyer Lansky didn't.
No.
Okay.
Meyer Lansky was just a businessman.
All right. So that's
could have ran U.S. Steel.
But now, but
grew up in a different kind of environment.
We're hearing about him now. There was a movie written, Meyer Lansky. I just watched it not too long ago.
Harvey Keitel, yes.
Harvey Keitel played Meyer Lansky. Who played the reporter? I forget who that was.
Yeah.
But you saying that didn't seem too accurate to you, huh?
No, it kind of minimized. You know, I think when you think about any kind of crime or a great fortune that's built on crime, there's a money trail. You know, follow the money.
Okay.
You know, and that's and then I would say that the second stage of expansion rapid expansion in Las Vegas started around 1960 with the move out of Havana into Las Vegas.
Okay.
Which is never, and part of it is it may never really be fully understood now. All those people are a bit long dead, and people that when they were living certainly didn't want to draw any attention to them. Mm-hmm. Although there are they have family that have benefited now from their business activities and that sort of thing. But it became necessary for organized crime to have a place to go to launder money, and so they made Las Vegas front and center. And you can have 5,000 accountants working around the clock in some of these big casinos, and they don't know where all the money is.
Of course, yeah.
And so money came out washed the other side, and that became. I think the question was not even just American money, international money. Like it became the international capital, you know.
And then Prohibition. When did that started in
Prohibition, I think, started in
1920
20, yeah.
to December
Volstead
5th,
Act.
1933. So that's
It's
so
13
what was
years, yeah.
what was going on here at that time? Was that it still hadn't really popped here,
No,
right?
no.
So
And, you know, you think about, like, so then 33, that gets revoked. The Prohibition gets repealed. And go back to that point about after World War II, the morals of the country loosening up, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, there was never anything like World War II, you know?
Right.
Except for maybe World War I. But it became where war became in people's consciousness because of electronic media. You know, I you go on Netflix or Amazon Prime or any of these streaming services, there's tons of documentaries about the war. You know, and people growing up in that age were shown, you know, this is the original propaganda, you could say, you know, shown images of the war. And I think that, you know, if you want to talk about the psychological aspect of what that does to people, is it kind of changes their attitude to being one more of like, you know, live live for today, you know.
I mean, that's a good point. Yeah.
And I remember a talk that Joseph Campbell gave where he mentions this specific point, and he uses the example of the libraries in America prior to World War II. You never checked out a book. They were lending libraries. You walked in, you took a book, and when you were finished with it, you returned it. You know, after World War II, the libraries suddenly were being depleted completely of all their books. People weren't returning them, so they had to come up with a system to keep track of the books.
Interesting.
So people could return them.
Wow.
You know, and that I think is a good example.
That's a good
of that
point of where the world kind of turned, right?
Yeah. Like there's yeah. Like
Yeah.
I think you could say too that there was that the influence of media is because we were born into it. We're not really aware of it so much. But I think that prior to the 1950s, people thought of themselves as private citizens. They were citizens of this country. After the proliferation of electronic media, 1950s, 1960s, television, it becomes, you know, everybody gets a television in their home. It becomes like the public square box. You know, everybody's watching it at the same time. We go from being citizens to being a public, like an actual like body of people. You know, and we lose our sense of individual identity, and with that also, though, we lose our sense of civic community. You know, and civic pride.
Lansky was the liaison for international dealings for over 40 years, the 20s through the 60s, and he didn't come out here much. He didn't set foot out here a lot. He managed it from a distance.
Yeah.
And Bugsy was his eyes and ears out here.
It would be interesting to see if he ever came out here.
Lucky Luciano, he's another guy like Bugsy then, right?
Well, he was a Sicilian-born mafioso, Italian mafia. There's, you know, the early 1900s, the people that ran organized crime, that day-to-day operations were the Italian mafia. Mostly Sicilians, they were actually, and it comes back to
violent
the way they
people,
did,
right?
The way they did things for hundrds of years in their
Is
in
it
the
a
old
violent
country.
culture by nature?
Yeah, the Romans.
Oh,
They're the old Romans.
they're the old Romans.
Yeah, yeah.
Ah.
And in that land is always like Italy was always like not one nation really, but made up of a bunch of little city states.
You smart son of a bitch. You're the one that
Makes
stole all the
sense,
books from the libraries.
Yeah, didn't return them.
And the crime
Little
syndicate,
NATO.
they're in bed with who? J.
So,
Edgar
like-
Hoover. Or sorry, were you finished? Did you have more to say about the
I was
Sicilians?
just going to say, like, they worked together with like these Jewish immigrants that were coming from Eastern Europe mostly. We talk about in the documentary because they were being persecuted by the Russians and well, they've always been persecuted.
The Jews?
Yeah. Since the days of the diaspora when they were separated. They had in the first and second century of we call it, modern times, Christian times, post Christ, you could say. There were two major battles between the Jews and the Romans in the land of Judea, which is now where Israel is.
Okay.
And newsflash, the Romans won. And they basically they were so heavy-handed on the Jewish people that lived there, the Semitic tribes, that they gradually started to migrate into different parts of Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So wherever they went, they were, there's always the idea of the wandering Jew, and large reason why there is that always they're outsiders wherever they go. They always and being that way, I think they learned to be tight with each other and formed into tight alliances, and that carried over into when a lot of them went to New York. In the early 1900s, and that neighborhood where Lansky grew up is also the neighborhood where Benjamin Siegel grew up.
Okay.
And they all had their own little mafia.
Okay. Yeah.
And they didn't challenge they worked together with the Italians more than they were adversaries.
Yeah.
Because they weren't going to defeat the Italians. There were many more of them, and.
Okay.
And again,
that's
it was
good
the
info.
Romans have always beaten going back for centuries. Yeah.
And then the crimes.
Lucky Luciano was he's one of the original organizers of the Italian mafia into a crime syndicate of, they call it the Five Families.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And they were in bed with J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI.
They became so, yes. Mm-hmm.
And what people speak of with conspiratorial overtones is the deep state. Well, we know there's a deep state now, right? Even the OSS predecessor, the CIA, would develop an important relationship with Lansky and his associates. We shall see later.
Well, I think, the idea of a deep state and the real power in America is closely related to who actually controls our nuclear arsenal. Who actually has that power to say whether or not we can use it or not.
Who is that? Elite families?
It's obviously through
BlackRock?
Well, no, I think those people, sort of like you could think in the early 1900s where the Jewish mafia and the Italian mafia were partners, and the Jewish mafia were the financiers. It's still that way, but the people that they're financing are the people that have the real control. and that coming out of World War II, that was the CIA, Central Intelligence.
Yeah.
Intelligence agencies are always, you want to find, who has the power, you always go through them. I think in any country. And
no, they go keep. Yeah, you're good. I'm just trying to find out where.
Yeah. So how I think what was interesting in my research and what I uncovered and it's this is speculative, but as Henri de Beausset said, the French philosopher, behind every great fortune is the perfect crime. And certainly I during where Prohibition was so important actually was that it established a distribution network for alcohol throughout the country. In fact, I mean, the whole idea of pharmacies grew out of that.
Yeah.
You could go to a doctor and get a prescription for alcohol.
Huh.
And go to
during
your
Prohibition,
pharmacy.
you
Yes.
could. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And I think there was something like 30 Walgreens at the beginning of Prohibition. By the end, there was like 5,000. Give you an
God.
example.
Yeah.
But what
how
they
many are
did,
there today? Yeah.
what they did over that, you think about that, it was a 13-year period. So that was a very long period of time. And eventually, once the violence was settled down over control of territories, with Al Capone, all the stories you hear in that, eventually, because as like they say in Godfather, I'm a businessman. Violence is bad for business, and so they eventually became very cohesive in the way they distributed alcohol. I think not much different than the way a grocery chain or a retail company would distribute their products. And then what happened was that when when Prohibition ended, that model was then used for narcotics.
Sure. Yeah. Probably still is today.
And,
right?
Well, yeah. I think it's and what my research led me to conclude was that the government was just was getting drugs from South America, Latin American countries, possibly Middle Eastern countries, flying them into Las Vegas, and then selling them wholesale to Meyer Lansky's syndicate with the money from the casinos.
Wow. So
that's what was going on.
So they probably use Nellis Air
And then
Force
they were
Base,
using
right?
that
They
money.
use a military.
Yeah, I always think that that possibly Area 51
Okay. Yeah.
makes sense, but there that whole land there is it's really it's a vast stretch of land. It's highly protected. You're not getting around there.
No way.
So these deals were done very secretively.
Yeah.
But it made tremendous sense that this is what was really going on.
And so then that was sold to the end user on the strip during their time here.
The money was taken out of the casino. It was laundered money that was taken out of the casinos.
Okay.
That was given to the CIA or these other intelligence agencies that were fighting proxy wars all around the world. Remember, we were fighting for dominion of the world. So, the Southeast Asia and Central America,
they're really
Latin
fighting
America,
for their goods, their drugs, right?
And they needed money.
Yeah.
they couldn't just go to Congress and ask them for it because these were subversive wars.
Oh.
See?
Yeah.
And so
Interesting.
And
Wow.
so they were they then provided the cash flow, the crime
Okay.
syndicate through the casinos
Yep.
to finance these wars throughout the world. The narcotics were then distributed throughout the country from the supply that they would get when they flew into Las Vegas.
And it
There
says
we do
here,
it.
at the end of this section, you have a note here. It says, "Note to this section: it is important to remember that the audience understand how the underworld and overworld worked hand in hand." Well, I think
That's what
you
we just
covered
talked
that.
about.
You just covered that. Okay, that's some good information. Okay. That's you don't hear. I've never heard that before. So whatever research you got that led you to this, this is
Well, the money and the power.
pretty.
The money and the power goes into this. That was my main primary resource. That got
Yeah.
me thinking about this.